This is back in back in Tamu after the Japanese occupation. You've got Tamu, you've got Palel to the north, Pagoda down the Chinwin River. There's a Chinwin River, and there's Mandalay. 2 days after that, an Air Force flight lieutenant came down and wanted to know if we could get a Japanese sword. Arakan said, take him down the Yu River. So I told the guys, we're taking this officer down the Yu River. About halfway down there, the officer's soul fell off. I said, this is a waste of time, and turned back. We used the first aid bandages and wrapped them back up again. He went, and we never saw him again. He was a navigator on a Wellington who had just finished his tour of duty. 2 days after that, 100 Brigade came out, and we had to radio for transporting them back to Palel. They were a sorry lot too. They had ulcers on their legs and diarrhoea. We didn't lose any on patrol when the brigade was around. 84th Squadron arrived, Spitfires. As soon as they arrived, they started to grumble about the bush. I said, what do you want, a bowling green? One of the officers said, they'll have to get used to it. A couple of days after they arrived, we left back to Palel. It appears that while we were away, they erected a new village. While we were there, they had 10 days of Atraban treatment. This was a booster of anti-malarial, and we were supposed to stay in our beds for 10 days. Until then, we were without mosquito nets over 2 monsoons. No strenuous exercise on Atraban. Then after a few days, we're off again. First stop was Tamu. I thought we were going to stay, but we only replenished the water. Then we set off down the Yu River. Just to show you the Yu River, that's the view using Google Earth 3D. That's the Chinwin in the foreground, the Yu disappearing through a lot of little mountains, and the red dots is Tamu in the distance. Okay, we set off down the Yu River again. They had just put up a Bailey Bridge across to strengthen the bridge as the Japs blew it up. From there we carried down the Chinwin. There was another Bailey Bridge on pontoons there. That was the longest Bailey Bridge during the war. It was over a mile long. Went over it for about 3 miles, then stopped still beside the river, and one of the officers saw some fish in the river. The officer stopped us and we used gun cotton to catch the fish. When they came to the surface, the lads dived in and catch them. One lad dived in and he didn't come back up. They reckon he must have dived into a bomb crater. The Spitfires used to sweep down river and bomb shipping. Then we carried on that day and we got to a staging post. A lot of Army and Air Force personnel. The Army had a cookhouse and we had an evening meal. Then it was decided that our section would take a radio location back down the Chinwin River to a place called Muckador. I couldn't find Muckador, somewhere between Palel and Pagoda. I couldn't find it. It appears 100 Brigade was going to cross the river there and make a manoeuvre to go into Mandalay at a different angle to the main highway. I was helping to push the boat into the river and felt a nip on my finger. I looked at it and it was a green scorpion. I flicked it off onto the boat and we went. I told the guys and they said scorpions aren't green. We found it in the boat and we had never seen a scorpion that colour. We had to shove this radio location in at 18 miles. We said, what are we going to do for rations? They said, when you get there, we'll get you an airdrop. The truck was to warn troops of any aircraft, but the Japs never had aircraft in the area. They gave us 1 tin of sardines, between 2 and a packet of hard biscuits. We set off in the afternoon and got to a military police post at dark. They said we couldn't go any further tonight. Then they told us which track to take to Muckador. We arrived the next day, pitched some tents. There was about a dozen of us. Halfway through the next morning, 100 Brigade came down in 3 ducks down the river and took all the men and mules over. It was an infantry brigade. The duck went back up the river and the brigade was sorting themselves out on the other side when a DC flew over and I thought, here's our rations. And he drops all the rations on the other side of the river. We waited for the pilot and he dropped a load of newspapers. Fortunately, the brigade left parachutes, and when we found canoes and got there, we managed to trade the parachutes for food from the river traders We got jooks and vegetables. We radioed for pickup, and a 6-wheel drive truck came and got us and pulled out the Jeep. We got up and the unit at the top of the hill. There was a radio unit, so they combined them. We were stuck up there waiting for Mandalay to fall. It was on Pagoda Hill where I came down with malaria. When I went to hospital, they tested me blood, and the officer said, "You're short on nepecrine in your bloodstream. Why?" Then it struck me. When we left Muckador, the medical orderly, LAC leading aircraftsman, forgot to bring it. Paddy Smith had left us. He was a medic. They said he could do more good elsewhere. So we had more mepecrine for 7 days. He checked on the unit to make sure we're okay. He could have been put in for a charge for neglect. I was diagnosed with MT malaria. I don't know what MT stands for. We all had a bath. The army had dug a hole and used a trampoline. They fill it with water from a well. We found some soap and we all had a bath. There was an oxen and cowhide bags they used to lower it into the well, and the oxen would pull it out. I was in hospital for 4 days. They put me on aspirine again. Nothing happened to the orderly, but I never saw him again. Then we left Pagoda Hill. We left the radar unit on the hill and went to Mandalay. The army had taken Mandalay then. There were no Japanese, just Burmese. A Burmese came up to me and asked if I wanted to buy some sapphires, and I bought them. I can't remember what happened to them, but I remember them having them at Berkeley Hostel. They were stored in cotton wool. We were there about 4 days. We weren't doing anything, just waiting for orders. There was grass growing in the streets in a state of disrepair. A hurricane came in, and its wheels collapsed and it set on fire, and Shacky Hudson got onto the wing and got hold of the pilot by the shoulders. The doctor managed to get an injection into him, but we couldn't get him out. We had to leave him when the fire got bigger and the bullets started flying. Then we went to Lewe. We followed 20 division engineers and were going down the edge of an airstrip on a truck looking for a spot to set up. It was getting dark. I believe the truck lights were on. We could hear the shelling, but it wasn't near us. Taffy yells out, "Mitsubishi, Mitsubishi!" And I jump up the truck, but it was too late to get under the bloody thing, and a splinter from the bomb, enough to knock me off my feet, hit me. I was lying on the ground, and I said to one of the lads, "I think I've been hit." And I had a look, and I had. They pulled the first aid pack out of my trousers and bandaged me. In the next few minutes, people congregated around me, and the doctor gave me a needle. I don't know what it was. They put me on a stretcher and carried me about 200 yards and put me on an L5. There was already 2 army lads in there, one in the sling. When I was put in there, I don't remember anything else. It must have been the day after I woke up on a stretcher and were carrying me out of a DC. There were 3 of us in the ambulance. I remember the lad with the arm with the plaster on. It appears they had rebandaged my legs and I went to sleep again. It must have been the day after I woke up on a stretcher and they were carrying me out of the DC. There were 3 of us in the ambulance. The next time I woke up was in hospital in Shillong with a cage over my legs. And I looked down and I could see my right foot, but I couldn't see my left one. I couldn't feel my legs. A medical orderly came by and I said, "Have you taken my leg off?" He said, "Why?" I said, "I can't feel anything." He said, "I'll get a doctor." The doctor came and said, "What's your problem?" I said, "Have I got a left foot?" "Yes." I said, "Have I got a right leg?" "Yes." The doctor got a pin out of the top pocket and stuck it in my feet. He said, "Did you feel that?" I said, "Yep." He said, "You'll be all right then." I was on penicillin. I hadn't been on it before and got an injection in each arm every 3 hours over 10 days. A lad there told me that he was on an airfield when the DCs brought in the Bailey Bridge and they put it on a runway. The Japs got into the Bailey Bridge and set up a machine gun. The only way to get them was to fire lots in and get a ricochet to hit them. Eventually it did. He was hit sneaking up and he got hit in the side. It passed right through and hit no organs. There was no surrender with the Japs. I was in the hospital for another fortnight and they discharged me and sent me up to Hill Station at Darjeeling. I was there for 3 weeks on rest and recuperation and to get my legs working again. I had to do a bit of walking and badminton. From there I went to Calcutta and the RTO at Howrah Station tried to find out where my unit was and he said, they're in Rangoon. How do I get there? He said, go to Dum Dum Airport. The Yanks are flying down there. So I go there and found the Yanks. They said they're going to Mandalay this afternoon. I got in and sat on the floor. They were taking aircraft spares to Rangoon. On the way, they stopped at Ramari Island. Yeah, it's a bit famous, the Ramari Island, to get some spares for tanks. We landed on Ramari Island and you could hear the small arms fire. It appears there were still Japanese there. They said, we can't get to Rangoon as the airport's still flooded, so we're going back to Calcutta. So we landed at Dum Dum Airport. I went back to the city and I saw some Air Force lads and they directed me to some billets at Chirangi. And the first bloke I met was an orderly corporal. He said, you've been transferred to Rangoon Group. I said, I'm not going to Rangoon. I said, I'm stopping here with the unit. The next guy was Squadron Leader Roll, CO. He said, don't bother going to Rangoon, stay here. There are 85 left and you make 86. He said, we're going back to Secunderabad to regroup. We were there about a week and went up to Secunderabad. This was when the war finished on the 15th of August 1945. Then we all got a drink of cider. We drank them dry. For 3 days, if you had a drink of anything, even water, you were pissed again. Don't know how that works. It was arranged from there for us to go on leave. About 20 of us went to Bombay, stayed in a big motel on the seaside. It had a swimming pool and they took care of the tucker. I got a letter saying that my brother George was coming to India. I saw some guys from his group. At first they wouldn't tell me. Then they told me where my brother was. And they said he was at Pune. They said, why don't you come to Pune for a couple of days? Pune was the officers' R7R place before the war. They said, if you haven't been to Pune, you haven't lived. We went to Pune and met George. We got him drunk on John Collins, gin and lime juice. And he never forgot that day. We left there and we got back to Bombay, finished leave and went back to Secunderabad. The next day the orderly corporal handed me a paper and said, you're going home. I threw it down on the ground and said, no, I'm going to the Mandalay with the lads. He said, you'll be released. B's for building trades. You wanted back to rebuild. You're going home. You better pick it up or I'll get the SPs and they'll put you on the train. There were 4 of us, but the other 3 had RAF posts now, and they were time-serving men and their time was up. They joined the war and their 6 years was up. The 4 of us went on the Strathard 22,000-ton liner, and it left Bombay on the 11th of November 1945. We ended up in England 3 weeks later. We got on the train and went to Padgate and got discharged from the Air Force. We got a civilian suit. They took everything else. I went back to 10. I went from 10 stone 6 to 12 stone 4. I ended up at home on the 14th of December 1945. I started work the day after Boxing Day for Jerem. On B release, you had to report to a labour exchange and they sent you to the area of most need. I was told to go back to my old employer. It was the mepacrim that saved us, stopping the malaria, the penicillin when I got hurt. I don't think the Japanese had such medical facilities.